Good day. I'm Professor Christopher Busby, and I'm an expert on the health effects of ionizing radiation, particularly internal ionizing radiation, and particularly uranium. I've studied uranium effects on health for perhaps 25 years, and I gave evidence to the Royal Society on the health effects of uranium, and I was a member of the British Government Committee, the Depleted Uranium Oversight Board. I've written a great deal about uranium and health, both in the scientific literature and in books. And I was involved in a number of court cases where Gulf War veterans who developed cancer were asking for compensation relating to their cancers, or rather their widows were. The problem with uranium is that it's not properly modelled by the current radiation risk models, and this enables the governments of the world that use uranium weapons to deny causation, where people are obviously suffering from cancer and other illnesses relating to the radiation doses from the uranium particles, but the dose model that exists doesn't permit them to prove that that's the case. The model is a very simple model, and it was dishonestly constructed, and it's wrong. Uranium particles are very small. The mean diameter of the uranium particles following an impact from a uranium penetrator is approximately a third of a micron or less. And these are inhaled. They become resuspended in the environment. They get inhaled. They get into the lungs, and then they can transfer to any part of the lymphatic system, where they produce a large local dose close to the particle. In fact, we've imaged these particles in various parts of the world where depleted uranium weapons were used, and you can see that the dose, the energy close to the particle being delivered into the tissue, is hundreds of times greater than is modelled by the current risk model. And of course the results of that are that people develop cancer and other genetic diseases. And the other thing where I have provided a new approach to understanding the effects of uranium is in the area of photoelectrons. So if you have a uranium particle inside you, then because uranium has a very high density, very high atomic number, it absorbs gamma radiation, natural background gamma radiation from the environment, which is everywhere, and it reflects it out by producing little photoelectrons, short-range photoelectrons, which are ionizing radiation, and they can cause ionization close to the particle. And the other thing about uranium, which I pointed out long ago, and since everybody has picked up on, but I was probably the first person to point this out, is that uranium binds very strongly to DNA, and DNA is the target for radiation effects. That it's DNA mutation which is the cause of the cancers and the cause of the genetic damage which leads to congenital malformations in children, birth defects and so forth. All of the birth defects that have been well characterized and photographed and shown on videos all over the place. In fact, I've done a number of studies on this. So I'm currently working with an Australian firm, International, and acting as a scientific advisor there in a project which I've suggested, where we study the increases in cancer in Iraq which have occurred in the last 30 years. There's about 3 times more cancer in Iraq than there was 30 years ago. That's an enormous increase, and since cancer is a disease caused by exposure to carcinogens, to mutagens, substances which attack the DNA, clearly something is the cause of this. Now, the United States and the British who use these weapons, they use the risk model to say that they're not to blame, that in fact the risk model doesn't predict any sort of increases in cancer. This is what the Royal Society said. But I gave evidence to the Royal Society which demonstrated that that was wrong because of these effects which I've just talked about. So what we propose to do, and what I've advised them to do, and what I'm and working with them in UA International, is a scientific study, an epidemiological study of people living in the south of Iraq who have increases in cancer. So we'll go ahead on that, I hope, and I hope that we'll be supported by the people who join in this project to get some kind of compensation, or at least acceptance that the people of Iraq exposed to the materials from the Gulf Wars. These people have been horribly damaged and treated. And in fact this is a war crime, because since this uranium, these particles go everywhere and they're inhaled by members of the public, we have a situation rather like a war gas, rather like poison gas. And of course that's banned under the Nuremberg Convention. So we want to bring all of this to the attention of the public, the people of the world. And that's the project, that I'm pleased to be able to help with. Thank you for listening.